This season's schedule has had a number of curveballs for the drivers, from brand new circuits to tracks they haven't run before, to the chaos of places like Monza's combined layout. So for the first time in a while, the drivers get to return to a sense of normalcy here at Silverstone. Will it tip things back in favor of our regular frontrunners? We'll find out soon as we get ready to watch Round 9 of the Lotus 49 Grand Prix Legends Series, and you'll see it all live here on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth is IMSA driver Joey Atterbury. Behind the scenes is our director Robert O'Brien, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. This scan of Silverstone is now 15 years old. Hard to believe the more modern layout has been around as long as it has. For a refresher on the old version, let's head to our track guide. Welcome to Silverstone. Most famously known for being the first circuit to host a round of Formula One, this place has since become synonymous with British motorsports. Hosting everything from sports cars to touring cars to open wheels and even motorcycles, it's a track that fits a wide variety of vehicles. With 5 different layouts to choose from, you've got a little something for any level of racing. The longest of those layouts boasts 17 turns over more than 3 miles or 5 kilometers, so it can take a bit to get around it, even in higher-powered machinery. Its main characteristics are the long straights, swift corners, and general lack of elevation change. Its most famous set of turns is definitely the Maggots-Beckett sequence, in which anything with high downforce finds itself challenged with the rapid changes of direction. While there is a fair bit of paved runoff and quick corners like Copse and Stowe, the time lost from going off can be costly. There's a few turns with opportunities for overtaking, including Vale, Abbey, and Priory, but in cars with less horsepower, expect the slipstream to be where many attempt to get by. The Hangar Straight is perhaps the most notorious for draft battles to erupt. All in all, this versatile racetrack located just northwest of London provides both history in its roots and action on the tarmac. The huge number of British fans that typically attend events are seldom left wanting. Well, not only is it the older scan here, Joey, but it's also the historic layout of that version. So it's going to be interesting to see these 49s really get some speed up.
Well, and if you ask me, I think these cars are a little bit more at home on this layout than one of the newer layouts. And as we see, always turn one of the fastest corners that totally requires commitment out of every competitor. And then the always famous S section through Maggots-Beckett. That's always great to watch these cars, as they really have tons of change of direction. And here in the sim, we finally get to see that suspension movement and how much the cars are really moving around underneath the competitors. And then probably the biggest and best passing opportunity down the Hangar Straight into turn 7, known as Stowe down there. And we'll just have to see how the rest of this track suits these cars, as they're very at home. Like I said, plenty of space to move around side to side, and hopefully we won't see too much contact.
Yeah, especially considering there is a lot of back and forth around here. If you have to race side by side, contact is a bad idea. Now, for the championship, again, we have a bit of a strange one because, apologies, this is the old version here. Bill Tyler leads now at 9 points ahead of Mick Claridge, who is in second place. 290 points, but Mick is not going to be around for the rest of the season. Sebastian Tixier, who had a bad race last time out, finished at, I believe it was outside of the top 10, in fact, maybe even out of the top 20 there, has fallen to third in the points. Sanchez is currently fourth, directly behind him, and then Nieva's been relatively close, but is a little bit more of a long shot. We also have the Formula 2 standings. Where is that right now here, Joey?
Yeah, so right now Glenn Becker currently leads the way and actually has a pretty dominating lead over Don Peak there in second place, but that's where it really tightens up. Second through, what I'm looking here, fifth place, all the way through Jeff Saunders, Andrew Eng, and Jan Steffen. Only a handful of points separate those 4 competitors, and then once again really close between Terry Tromhauser there in 6th, Cam Porter, and Christian Eschner all the way down there in the 8th place position. And for these F2 drivers, it's going to be about keeping these points going as the season starts to dwindle down.
As for the Nations Cup, it's the United States leading currently, and not by a huge margin, but they've extended it over the United Kingdom since last round. They were 1 point apart before. Spain still slipping backwards, but are in the hunt before you have to drop way back to Singapore. Unfortunately, with the bad results that we saw last time out for Tixier, they have fallen even farther behind. They're going to have a rough one at the end of the season to try and play catch up there. Now, for those who are not familiar with this series, Joey, what's the race details for today?
Round 9 of the 12-week season. Going to be doing 20 laps here at Silverstone, and every competitor's on an open setup. I know that if you're in the community forums, they help you with the car setups and provide a community setup, but still got to tweak and tune it to your preference out there. And drive-through penalty at 17x, disqualification at 25. And Joe, I don't think we're going to see that really come into play. I know that there's a lot of runoff here at Silverstone, so if you get into trouble, you can more than likely just dip 1 or 2 tires off of the track and avoid something big.
Exactly, and the only counter to that I will say is that if you dip your tires off a little too much, that could be a problem out here with those incident limits. But we are in the midst of qualifying. We're still looking for the first driver to set a time. Interestingly, Mick has actually shown up here today. Not expected, if I'm honest. But he's also got Jim Shedlick, who is usually extremely fast, out ready to compete once again. And then last week's winner, Togo Hisada, is here once again as the first time start to tumble in. Interestingly, Laust Olsen holds the provisional pole amongst the first 8 or few drivers to set a time. And now Sebastian Tixier goes faster by about 1/4 of a second.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the reason why we didn't see Mick out there is he's usually in a red car. He's a bit camouflaged right now in a yellow and black scheme.
Yeah, he used to run that all the time. I remember here before before he said he was going to take off, he switched back to it just briefly. But now we take a look at Laust Olsen with his on board, as I mentioned, able to get in a second. Very fast today for him on that first lap, but we'll see if he is able to go quicker the second time around, as he is usually one of our onboard cameras. Here you can see the older, much rounder version of Club leading up to what is now considered the Hamilton Straight, but didn't have a name back in the day when they scanned this. And yeah, this is a very different layout from here on out.
Well, and it's really interesting to see, just a step too far and had a little bit of understeer there. You saw it get out into the grass, and unfortunately that's going to cost Laust a lot of time here. You see he already realizes it, slowing down off the pace, giving up on this second qualifying lap.
Ooh, Toga Hisada has now taken the pole away. Ooh, and by half a second on his first lap over Tixier. Massive gains for that number 3. What can Sebastian do as he brings it around out of the final corner through Woodcut and past the start-finish line? A 40.8. That is much faster, and that's going to put him back on pole.
Sebastian Tixier, the first car in the 1 minute 40-second range for a lap time. And don't forget about this number 3, Togo Hisada, also on a screamer.
Yeah, Hisada held that pole for a little bit there, but now he's going to come back around to see if he can overtake. Oh, Gwen Old. We had made such a big deal about her being pretty good at the Roval with Monza's combined, because we know her as being someone who's very talented at oval layouts. But here today, she's put herself into 3rd right now. Mick Claridge's second lap, unfortunately, not able to get him any higher than 4th. But what about Hisada? Can he take the pole right back? We haven't had a repeat winner other than Mick Claridge this season. Could Togo maybe become the first one to get 2, or will Sebastian beat him to it? Hisada crosses the line. 40.7, and that is going to be just enough by 0.02 of a second.
Well, and Ove Trengrade snuck in there as well. He is only, like you said, 0.02 of a second. He edged out Sebastian Tixier.
And then Jim Shedlick tops them all. Wow, it is a wild end to the qualifying session. Jim Shedlick, now your pole sitter. Do we have anybody else that's likely to try and take them? I'm not seeing drivers out here that I expect to be able to go much quicker. And in fact, I'm checking if anybody has a second lap available, and I only see one car right now. That is Gary Quellen, but I'm not sure that we've ever seen Gary up on the pole before. He currently sits in 18th, so that'd be a real shocker, especially if he goes faster from here.
And Joe, usually in the sim world, qualifying is straightforward. That was an excellent qualifying section. We were noticing Gwen Old so fast, all the way down to position number 5 with all those people putting in those times at the end.
I'd still say that's an excellent qualifying for her, as here is your starting order. Jim Shedlick on the pole with Togo Hisada starting beside him. Ove Trangrade, much better compared to what we've seen from him before. He'll start from third, and Sebastian Tixier will be P4. Gwen Old is P5. Mick Claridge returns mysteriously to take sixth as John Olson starts seventh, and Ben Zocco will be eighth. Lyle Stolson, who briefly shone in the light with a provisional pole, was bumped down to ninth eventually, and Jorge Nieva will start from 10th.
There in 11th place, we have Richard Watson, followed up with David Rossi there in the 12th position. 13th, Gary Ho. Bill Tyler next to him. Glenn Becker rounding out the top 15. There in 16th spot, we have Jeff Saunders, followed up with Jack David Spickett. Gary Quellen in 18th, Yanni Lehman 19th, and Robert Plumley in the 20th place.
Yuri Geisen will be in 21st. Tobias Harnvey 22nd. Next row sees Alan Graham and Paul Wilson. After that, Michael Grissinger and Stay Morris will be in 26. Rafael Franco starts 27th, and Brad Cathcart in 28th. Bjorn Ackerman 29th, and Don Peak managed 30th.
Hassan Jin there in 31st. Jan Steffen 32nd. Jason Clapper, Kirk Clapper, Terry Traumhauser. Few more down here. Mats Linden, Arthur Sujana, and also Richard Griesek rounding out 38 cars here, Joe.
Number of them failed to set any lap time. Jason and Kurt, that's no surprise, but the others, I'm a bit shocked that so many had trouble. It is quite cool on the track surface at 69 Fahrenheit. That's 21 Celsius for the metric friends, and wind of about 9 miles an hour, 15 kilometers an hour. But these are not very aero-dependent cars, so hopefully it should be a non-issue. With this being the old layout, they wrap all the way around Woodcut and start way far back. It looks like we're waiting on just a couple as Laus Olsen now gets out there. We still need Jack Spickett, who is almost out of shot, actually, here. You can just see the opening back there. And I believe that we have everybody except for Jack on the grid now, and he's got less than 10 seconds, so he might be starting from pit lane. That'll be a bit of a shame considering it was a decent qualifying for him, and that is it. The engines will now start to rev as the lights come up for round number 8, and the green flag is out. Shedlick is off very well, but then his second phase does not look so hot, and Toga Hisada starts to come up the outside. Will he challenge up into Cops? No, we can't get side by side. Still a battle between Trangrade and Tixier to decide third. Carries on out of the corner as they continue to go too wide. Everybody else cleanly goes through the first turn.
Yeah, I'm watching through the back of the pack, and everybody makes it through turn 1 and into Maggots and Beckett's for the first time. This is where the track starts to really narrow up, and we got an incident up at the front.
That looks like John Olson, unfortunately. Oh, that is a real shame to see. Somebody else is off. That is Ben Zocco. I'm wondering if the two were related. I didn't quite catch and see if the two had made some sort of contact, but we'll try and get some more information on that. But Shedlick continues to lead. Hisada follows him with Tixier in third. Again, there is no Vale chicane, really, more of a Vale sweeper coming into club this time as the drivers have the old historic layout.
A much faster sweeping layout, if you ask me, and it's a little bit refreshing to see these cars on this layout, a bit like watching an old broadcast, Joe.
Exactly. Alan Graham also ran into trouble coming through club. Looks like he's going to fall to the back of the field. Unfortunately, in this version, they can't get rid of the old infield section, so it all slows up here into Brooklands, and it's very wide, for Sebastian Tixier.
A little bit of a mistake there. It's going to offer that position up, but it's really Toga Hasada following Jim Shedlick in the back, and then you see Ove Trengrade starting to apply the pressure to the back of Tixier as they complete another lap.
Coming down into the braking of Cops, it looks like they're really settled in now. Not a whole lot of side-by-side racing up here at the top. Oh, we got another off. Laust Olsen now. Both of the Olsens. Oh, no, and Laust actually wound up on his lid. Somehow he must have hit the wall wrong or something. He was fine until I looked back for a second.
Yeah, and this happened all by himself. We're going to catch this replay here. He's going to come out of the final turn, and I don't know if it's a little bit of wheel spin, but the car hooks driver's right, and I don't know if it hits the inside wall. Oh, that's what it is. Just a big loose moment off of the last corner, Joe.
Oh, he hit the inside wall. I must have not looked closely enough. He was already on his lid.
He's got a strong neck there, doesn't he?
He has a very strong neck. The Scandinavians are known for really working those muscles, but unfortunately, it's not going to turn him right side up, so he has to take a tow. And he could still get back in this race depending on the state of the car, but can't always be confident. Glenn Becker seems to have had an issue as I see him dropping down the order, but I'm not sure what happened. There he is on screen now. That looks like another victim of club.
Yeah, and another self-spin. He looked to be just on the outside of the racing line, not in the groove, and lost grip and unfortunately made pretty hard contact with the tire wall.
Seems to be a theme here today. Not a track that's known for drivers hitting the wall all that much. Is like you said, they've got a lot of modern runoff that helps them out, but they're finding it today. That is for sure. As we come back onto the front stretch, Shedlick leads Hisada. It's about a second. He's been pulling away, and though it doesn't seem like a lot, if he keeps that consistent gap and manage to increase it at the same rate, it's going to be a big gap by the end.
It will be, and sometimes we see that with these Lotus 49 machines, but it's usually Mick Claridge, the one that's kind of pulling away the gap. And if you ask me, Joe, I'm not too worried. Jim Shedlick's definitely laying down some heat out front, but these front four are relatively close together still.
Yep, they're at least within the hunt right now. As you can see, Trengrade has been continuing to try and pressurize the number 5, but Tixier is not falling for it yet. This is going to be interesting because both Seb and Ove are kind of known for being hot and cold when it comes to dealing with pressure. Sometimes they withstand it with immense cool, and other times they seem to buckle.
Well, and I've been watching that number 10 car because you see how close he is behind Tixier, and I wonder how much speed Ove has in that race car because he snuck in there at the end of qualifying with a lap that we really weren't expecting, but he's a consistent front runner in the series and certainly showing a lot of pace today.
He's trying his best, but right now, with how few easy passing opportunities there are around here, seems like he's not finding a good chance quite yet. He's going to need a mistake, most likely, from Sebastian to be able to try and send one up the inside. And he will. He loves to race in that Roadrunner liveried machine as they now complete lap 3 and get into lap 4. Jim Shedlick setting the fastest lap of the race up at the front, now up to about 1.1 seconds ahead as we now check out Richard Watson.
Well, and you saw that purple time pop up. Jim Shedlick, the first car in the 1 minute 40-second bracket. We saw a few of them dip into the 40s in qualifying, and that just shows you the pace of these front four and really how fast they're going.
Right now, as Nieva leads on Richard Watson, they've also got David Rossi in there. F2 now graduated to F1 driver in that championship. His iRating continues to raise, and it's no wonder he's continuing to show as well as he does, even within the top 10 and the overall points. Has been a serious threat to anybody who wants to have a good finish in the championship for that F1 fight. But right now, Richard Watson has a similar situation to Trengrade, just kind of stuck in behind Jorge.
Well, and you mentioned kind of the progression from the F2 to the F1 series. It's really fun to watch as these drivers enter this series and try to wrestle this car. And once they get grips with them and start becoming more and more regular, they get promoted from that F2 championship into the F1 championship, depending on how clean they are, granted, out there on the racetrack. But fun to watch that progression, the natural progression of a driver.
Ooh, big look down to the inside, but Richard can't quite get it done. He does get a good launch, but now put him on the outside of Luffield, and that's going to be a hard one to pull the long way around. Yeah, I was going to say he falls back into line, but clearly Nieva's got to be watching in his mirrors now.
Correct, and not only Watson, but David Rossi is right there, that if the two battle side by side, I expect that number 17 to enter himself into the party.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to try and take advantage of any opportunity that presents itself here. Now into the Maggots and Beckett sequence. In fact, Rossi looks very strong into this series of corners, just a little braver on the brakes as the car dances around, weaving back and forth, and on to the hangar straight, a little too far apart, I think, for any slipstream to help.
I was actually really impressed with the exit Richard Watson got there going out onto the hangar straight. Had a tremendous run, and you see him taking a look down here into this corner and not quite close enough to make the move, but just really good drive off.
Doing an awesome job out there, running in the top 10 currently, but we'll see if we get any movement later on. I said that this is a bit more back to their traditional fare, but I'll be honest, things being as single file as they have been is not traditional for this series. Usually you see lots of good racing out there, despite how difficult these cars are. It seems like this track is proving extremely tough to try and make moves.
And I think that has to do with the sweeping nature of the corners. And look at this, the 19 getting pretty brave, trying around the outside, and that's going to open up the door for Rossi. But Joe, these long sweeping corners, it doesn't really provide a lot of over-under opportunities. It's tough to get that front end to turn so late in the corner.
That's a good point. And seems like the driver is discovering that here today as this trio carries back onto the front stretch and into Copse once again. But there have now been many attempts from Richard Watson, none of which have been successful. So will we see that number 19 eventually get one to stick? Or is he going to have to get his elbows out?
You know, this is the point that Watson had a great run going out of the hangar straight, or I should say onto the hangar straight that last lap. And sure enough, gets a really good run here this time in the slipstream behind Nieva.
Yeah, he's there. He's looking for it, but Jorge is wise to it. He blocks to the inside to try and cover off any attack. Drifts a little bit out. There could be a bit of an over-under for Richard Watson. No, it's not going to be enough.
Now into this sweeping section, and sure enough, David Rossi closes it right back in, given just one corner that the two were side-by-side battling.
He's just sticking right there. He's doing what he needs to do, to his credit. Richard is within range, if you will, if something happens with Jorge, but just no opportunity has been presented itself quite yet. So we'll have to keep an eye on this to see if eventually he manages to find a big enough gap here. As once again, he's going to try the outside. We've seen this a couple times. He's got to be careful, though. You talked about Rossi. He's been getting ever closer to that gearbox, and I figure David's not going to let him open that door too many times as we come back to Hisada now.
Agreed. Is, you know, just one more comment on that battle we were just watching. It seemed like Nieva not very confident in the slower speed corners, and Richard Watson has a lot of pace through there. One of the reasons why I think the 19 is so fast behind the 12.
So for those curious, Hisada is still the same distance behind, just about a second off of Shedlick here. So he's not lost ground. You were right about him keeping pace. So yeah, Jim maybe managed to pull a little bit of a gap early on, but he's not been able to do much more than that. But Tixier has dropped Trangarade. As you look back from Shedlick, you can see it's a pretty far gap from that third place car to the fourth place Ove. And nowhere to be seen is Mick Claridge, surprisingly, but maybe he just hasn't had time or the facilities to practice in these recent weeks now that he's been away for a bit. But the number 2 is about 4 seconds behind as we ride on board with second place Togo Hisada.
Pretty clean racetrack as he's trying to hunt down our leader, and I know that we can't see it, but he definitely sees Sebastian Tixier in his mirror just a half second back. So These cars on a mission to try to hunt down Jim Shedlick, our leader out front, but Togo Hisada has got to be hitting every single corner perfectly, because if he doesn't, Sebastian Tixier is right there to take it away from him.
Oh no, Richard Watson has gone around and he's on the racing line. He's causing a lot of cars to have to scatter down through Brooklands. And you can see Nieva no longer has him near. And in fact, he's got David Rossi in front of him. So not sure what happened. Oh, tried to send one up the inside.
Joe, I was waiting for that move to happen, and unfortunately it collected Nieva as well. Richard Watson in the slow speed section, he was just so much faster than Nieva, and he took the opportunity to slide up the inside and lost the back end here, and you see it happen, just too much yaw angle, and around it goes.
Bit of a move of desperation, I fear, and the Texan paid the price for it. David Rossi gains 2 places, just like that, as we expected, and is up to 7th. He's got a ways to get to Gwen Old. It's about 4 seconds up the road as we watch over his shoulder.
Yeah, David Rossi has that clean track in front of him. He just kind of waited at the buffet line, took his snack, and now he gets to go eat in peace and quiet back there. But Bill Tyler back here in the 9th place is in the middle of a pretty big scrum.
Yeah, he's still up 5 from where he qualified. One of our winners so far this season, and in fact, our points leader right now. But the way things sit, I think Tixier is going to be able to catch, if not possibly pass him in the points. And that was Robert Plumley in that yellow machine behind that was gaining a lot down through Bridge. Hard to pass into there, so no surprise that he didn't manage to get by. Although, once again, the brakes seemed to be very good on Plumley, but he had a little bit of a shaky exit off of Brooklands.
And one thing I'm noticing when these cars are in that slow speed section, Joe, is that they don't seem to have a lot of mechanical grip underneath them. So if you push it a little bit too far, the cars start to wiggle and move around a lot underneath you, and easy to lose the car in that sort of state.
It's a bit of irony that a car that has no wings has poor mechanical grip.
I'd blame it on the tires. The tires are so different back then compared to what we have now.
Yeah, it's a completely different set of technology on this car compared to what we're used to in modern race cars. In fact, it's more than 50 years old at this stage, as Robert Plumley is getting ever closer to Bill Tyler, but he's also got Gary Quellen starting to encroach upon the pair of them as we actually get very close to the halfway point of this race ourselves. Nobody can take a peek coming into Stowe this time, although not a great exit from Bill Tyler. And Plumley, how brave is he? Not brave enough to try and make something of it down into Club.
He's got, oh, here's a mistake out of Bill Tyler. A big wiggle, going to allow, not quite close enough. Robert Plumley not going to be there to take advantage. And in fact, here comes Gary Quellen, possibly with a move on Plumley.
Oh, and he puts him to the outside of Abbey. That is a very fast corner right on the limit for these cars. He manages to defend into Bridge, but Quellen gets another bite coming down into Priory, and he can't make it stick. So the 9 stays in 11th.
Really good, respectful racing out of all of these competitors, though, because even though they were side by side, they left each other room.
Well, this has really put everybody together. Tyler, Plumley, Quellen, Gary Ho behind them, Yuri Geisen, and Richard Watson are all very close together. But we return to the battle for the lead. Hisada versus Shedlick. And actually, I'd say that this is more of a 3-car battle, maybe 4-car battle, because Ove's back there. But Tixier definitely is close enough to Hisada and Shedlick. They got to be worried.
Oh, 100%. And I know that Ove is just kind of hanging out. He's lurking back there in 4th place, but he was actually the fastest car on the racetrack that last time around with a 40.77. Compare that to our leader with a 41.2. So I would not count out Ove from this battle quite yet, Joe.
Now, we don't talk about it as much, but these cars, much like we do discuss with the Lotus 79, don't take refueling, and therefore the characteristics of the car are going to change a little bit over the course of the race as it burns off that fuel. And I wonder if maybe that's what we're seeing with Togo, that latter half of the race, the car comes alive.
I love that you talk about it. It brings out the nerd in me. I love car setup, and you're right. If you set it up for the first couple laps, you're probably going to have a car that's slow in the last few laps versus if you do these long runs and really have to set up the car at the end of a run. That's what you want. It might not produce the speed that you want at the beginning, but you have the race car you need at the end.
Just see that slide from Shedlick as he came off of Woodcut. It was really right up against it. He sees Hisada in his mirrors, and he knows he's got to pick up the pace here, but does he have the pace? As now we are actually to that halfway point and are in the final 10 laps of this event. Down through Maggots and Beckett's. Togo's still kind of hovering around, waiting for something to open. We saw from Richard Watson how tough it's going to be to try and make the pass. So even if he's right on that gearbox, he's going to have to get tricky.
He will, and it's almost like Jim Shedlick is listening to us because he put down a 40.9 that last lap, really starting to stretch his legs a little bit. But Togo Hisada with a 40.8, he is not letting our leader go anywhere at all.
So far, we've only lost Glenn Becker, Lau Stolson, and Arthur Sujana out of this race. Grissinger and Peak, who did have to stop into pit lane, are back out there. In fact, I think Grissinger may have started from pit lane for this race. But so it's not seen a lot of attrition despite having a few messy laps at the beginning of the race. And up at the front, it has maybe looked calm on the surface, but I can assure you the nerves inside the cockpit are raised.
Well, and I love watching these cars, especially Toga Hisada here. He seems to have a lot of shock built into the car. You really see the nose dive under braking, and you don't get to see that in modern cars very much anymore. Fun to watch the vehicle dynamics.
That's one thing I do love about it. I know it's not, it doesn't produce fast cars as much in modern days, but the old time really seeing the shocks move around in these things just looks cool, and it makes it feel even more dynamic as it has to take these corners back and forth, sometimes over rises and crests, actually getting four wheels into the air in certain cases. And Hisada backing off a little bit. Shedlick again picking up the pace, responding to the Japanese driver.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a little bit of an ebb and flow here is that Jim Shedlick goes out there and lays down a couple screamers and then maybe has a mistake for a lap or two, and that allows Hisada to catch back up. But all three or four of these cars running a pretty similar pace. It's just who can turn the cleanest laps most consecutive.
I love also the international flavor of this series. You think about these top four that we have in this fight for the win. Shedlick, an American, trailed by a Japanese driver. Tixier, a Frenchman who currently hails from Singapore. And then Trangereid's a Norwegian.
All of the different countries represented out here. And I think it has to do also with the type of car here. This is really a beloved car from an era that we grew up watching, and everybody enjoys racing their favorite historic cars. It just brings back so many memories.
Yeah, I am definitely drawn to these vintage cars. I've always been a lot more interested in them in the sim than most of the modern ones, which are all very cool. And I do drive a lot of the modern cars here, but I don't know. There's so much more love that I have for the old machinery as they come out of Cops once again. It's starting to stretch even farther apart now, more so between Tixier and Hisada, as that's up to about 1.2 seconds.
Yeah, stretched out a little bit, but Hisada's trying to stay right there. Ove Trangereid has actually caught Sebastian Tixier. So, Joe, it's a little bit more of two pairs of battles, first and second, and then third and fourth.
Indeed. So splitting apart, and I know we've been watching this a lot. There have been some good battles in the mid-pack. In fact, the fight for 11th with Gary Quellen, he's got Richard Watson right behind him. Remember, Richard on a bit of a recovery here after he had an issue on a failed overtake down into Brooklands, and has been getting ever closer to Gary, but even though he's thinking about it down into Stowe, yeah, that's not nearly close enough.
Well, and you mentioned it, great mid-pack battles, and Richard Watson has had his hands full the entire race. Doesn't matter who's around him, it seems like he's been in a battle from the beginning.
Siri Geisen in front of them in the top 10 right now, up 11 positions. Same with Plumlee just in front of them. Both have gained a bunch. Not our hardest charger currently. That belongs to Jason Clapper, as he tends to do, not qualifying from the back and just fighting his way through the field. But these three are very close to potentially changing positions if they make a mistake, or, well, he did. Despite it not going right for him once before, Richard Watson hasn't given up on that move down into Brooklands. He's still poking his nose into there.
Well, you can't teach a kid all the time. When he grabs the pot and it's hot, sometimes he's got to learn twice.
That you say that and make me think there's a bit of a story behind that for you.
No, it's tough being a race car driver. Actually looks like a car. Is that maybe
Plumlee.
Bill Tyler? Is that Plumlee off in front of him there? And then, no, it's just when you have confidence as a racing car driver in one section, it's tough to train that out of your brain when you consistently see that you're faster than everybody else right there.
Yeah, and for the Texan, he seems to think that it still might produce something. It can. We have seen passes into there. It just needs a little cooperation from the other drivers. So Plumlee now only up 10 as Yuri Geisen takes the 9th place and is up 12 positions instead. But look at how crunched together they are as we go back to somebody off course here. This is Jack David Spickett, who did start from pit lane, if I'm understanding correctly. And though he was supposed to be gridded in 17th, the fact that he's in 19th is a bit of a testament to him picking his way through.
Absolutely. You mentioned Jason Clapper, who's our biggest mover, up 12 positions. But Jack David Spickett, we remember he didn't make that grid spot, so he is up quite a few positions from starting way back there in pit lane. And if we look, Ove Trangrade is all over the back of Sebastian Tixier, and to report on this last lap, he actually had an opportunity to poke the nose down underneath and decided better of it and still hangs on the back of Tixier.
In fact, he's just climbing all over the back of him. I think he'll get more chances if he can just get a good run off of one of these corners, maybe out of Chapel here under the hanger straight. It's close, but I don't know that it's quite close enough. He's going to hover right in that slipstream and at least bring himself in to within under 0.2 of a second before they finally hit the binders.
And where Tixier was a little bit slower this last lap is coming up in these next few corners here. This is where Ove really showed the speed. And just as I say that, Togo Hisada is also all over the back of our race leader, Jim Shedlick.
Oh, yeah, he has caught up to him. So you said earlier it's two pairs of battles, and yeah, that's exactly what we've got now as the number 3 tries to overtake the number 1. He's got about a quarter of the race left to go here, so there is time. But how many opportunities realistically is he going to have?
Well, and I'm going to go back to the point that you mentioned earlier, Joe, is that maybe speed in different areas of the race. And these two cars obviously have been the fastest cars all race, but Togo Hisada has consistently shown that he's able to hang right there with Jim Shedlick and, in fact, sometimes show even more pace than our leader.
And here we got something interesting. They've got lap traffic that's very slow through Cops. That's going to check up Shedlick just a little bit, but not enough that Hisada can manage to capitalize. They still have Grissinger up ahead. Glenn Becker is probably within range to be lapped, so there's going to be more of these cars and more chances to maybe distract that number 1 and pounce.
Looks like Shedlick gets a pretty good run out onto the hanger straight, is able to keep Hisada at that arm's length distance, and looks like Sebastian Tixier and Ove Trangrade were also able to work their way around that lapped car.
Shedlick has won in this series before, and in fact won multiple times out there. So he knows how to get this done. There was a season a few ago where he had his fair share of victories, but coming out of club car wiggles just a little bit, but nothing to be concerned about for now as he's managed to stretch it to about 0.4 of a second over Hisada. We're going to come down to 4 laps to go here next time by.
And I want to keep the cameras right here, but it is one heck of a battle between Yuri Geeson, Richard Watson, and Ben Zocco out on the racetrack. Yuri Geeson went full 4 wheels off through Maggots and Beckett's and just still stayed in the gas that lap.
Yeah, Shedlick has 7 wins to his name. In fact, he's the 6th winningest driver ever on the Grand Prix Legends Series, the broadcast races. As we watch this absolute train of cars weave its way down into bridge. Yuri is, way to the outside there for Ben Zocco. Thinking about a move on Richard Watson, but then backs out of it. That actually compromises him. And Robert Plumley is going to try to pull his own move on him. He's going to be able to get inside. No, excuse me. I was thinking of Richard Watson. This is Ben Zocco that he's attacking. But looks like Plumley's not going to be able to completely get it done. He just about got side by side there.
I love this battle. What are we, 6 or 7 cars here in the space of one camera frame, working 4 laps to go. I mean, this is one of the best races I've seen here on iRacing.
And apologies to Jim. I had completely forgotten that he actually took a championship that season. Oh, Hisada's in the lead. So not only did Plumley have an issue, but Shedlick must have, unless Togo really pulled an amazing move. And this happened into Stowe.
Yeah, Shedlick just out of the racing groove. We're going to catch this replay here. Our leader, Jim Shedlick, a little bit too deep into this corner here. You see him drift wide, and Togo Hisada right underneath.
Scares him off the racing line enough that he manages to get it done. Both of these drivers are former champions. And Ove train grade behind them as well. In fact, you have to go back to 4th place before you get to a driver who has not won a championship in this series with Sebastian Tixier, as Togo is ahead of Shedlick, but doesn't look like he's been able to run away all that quickly.
Well, and you remember Ove train grade around Sebastian Tixier. That happened out of turn 1. Tixier got out on the grass and around went Ove. So both of these battles swapping positions.
Just like that, in a blink of an eye, it suddenly all changes around at once. Jim making sure that this stays a good close race here with Togo Hisada. Now 3 laps to go. Whoa, he's going to try it down into Beckett's. He does get Togo off the racing line, but he doesn't hurt him enough. Oh, he gets a poor exit onto the hanger straight. We're going to go wheel to wheel as it's a drag race up to Stowe. Who's got the better brakes? It's going to be Shedlick around the outside. Last time he was in this position, he had to give it up. This time, he's trying not to, and it'll give him the inside into Vale as he hangs tough as they come up to this quick left flick. Will this get the job done? No, they're still wheel to wheel now, coming through Club Corner, and they actually start to approach Michael Grissinger. Well, they have to try and complete this battle as they lap a car.
They will, because they're coming up to another sweeper. Hisada's gonna have to give it up here. Finally, Jim Shedlick back to the front after side by side for what seemed like half a lap.
Amazing stuff from both of them there. And thankfully, Grissinger saw what was happening. Oh, here we go again. Down to the inside of Priory. Hisada makes a dive. They're going to go wheel to wheel down through Brooklands as well. Shedlick fending him off. It switches back in his favor down through Luffield. Could be an over-under, though, if Hisada can get the traction. No.
But he's right there in the slipstream. If he's brave enough, he might be able to poke his nose into turn 1. A very unorthodox move, and here it goes. He's taking a look into 1.
Side by side into Cops now. They've had more corners side by side than not, I think, in this last lap. But Hisada cannot keep him back. Shedlick into the lead. And now they weave through Maggots and Beckett's, and Tixier's had a problem. Tixier's hit the wall hard.
Problems for our 4th place runner. I mentioned Tixier had problems on the exit of turn 1 earlier, and exact same thing, just goes wide on 1 here. We're going to catch this replay, and he hooks it driver's right.
Oh, he was so close to the back. I think he maybe lost sight of his turn in or apex or something. And yeah, it starts to go, and there's nothing he can do. That's a fast corner.
Yeah, just really unfortunate for Tixier. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It looks like he just lost sight of his turn-in, which put him way off track. And trying to gather up the cards, what we call pushy loose. You got the steering wheel cranked so much it's not turning, and when it finally does turn, turns way too much.
He actually hasn't lost fourth place in spite of that, but Gwen Old is catching up to him quickly. So I wonder if that may change. We're seeing a lot of moves now. Nieva passes Rossi, and I think Quellen just passed Zoko, or it may have been Zoko and Giesen back there. It's it seemed like it was just boiling up, and now that the pressure cooker has reached that boiling point, it has really just exploded out on the track. Up at the front, though, the white flag is out for Jim Shedlick, who narrowly holds the lead.
And Joe, I see 3 cars right in front of our lead battle here. We're going to have a variable on the last lap.
Oh, my goodness. Glenn Becker, Laust Olsen, Kurt Clapper. Now, Laust is not racing for position with these two, so that's the good news. But I do believe that Clapper's going to let them both by. Interesting. And that actually makes him slow through Maggots and Beckett's. Is he going to be able to stay out of the way of Shedlick? Oh, not quite. Shedlick has to kind of dive to the side, and this is not going to slow up the American. The Japanese driver is going to have to get a lot closer on this final lap.
We're coming up to this rhythm section here. Still 2 more cars, but ooh, little bit of a slide out of Togo Hisada as he tries to keep up with Shedlick as he's turning up the heat here on the last lap.
Oh, loved seeing the yaw of these cars from that gopher cam, just flying over them through Vale. And now up towards Abbey. Shedlick with a handy 0.7 of a second gap. That's the biggest gap he's had for nearly half this race over Togo Hisada. But what's going to happen with Becker and Olsen? Are they going to let him through because he's catching quickly, and it's a slow part of the circuit where it's hard to overtake? No doubt Togo is going to try and close this in and attack if he finds even a whiff of an opportunity, but can he get close enough? They head through Luffield. Shedlick so far looks like he's pretty safe despite maybe being held up mildly by Glenn Becker, and as the checker flag is held unfurled, Jim Shedlick will get win number 8 in his career here at Silverstone.
Really impressive run from that number 1 car. You see Ove Trengrade comes home 3rd. Sebastian Tixier gonna manage that 4th place position, and somebody that we didn't mention all day, Joe, Gwen Old coming home with the top 5.
Redemption after last week, missing out on the potential win and wrecking on the final lap. Nieva with the top 5. David Rossi was 7th. But critically for the championship, Tixier was still multiple positions ahead of Tyler. He's going to continue to gain on this one. So Tyler only 8th place out there. Whoa! Zoko, though, having a spectacular finish to his race.
Hey, he crossed the line, and that is all that matters. Kind of got the style points afterwards.
Exactly. I think he kept his foot in it no matter what was happening there. And the last of the drivers come across. We only had 28 of our 37 finish on the lead lap there at the very end. We'll come back with the official results as well as driver interviews, so stick around. Welcome back to Silverstone. We had a classic race for a classic car, and Jim Shedlick, who didn't lead every lap, managed to come back and win it after Togo Hisata overtook him. He fought back and got into the lead to take it away from the Japanese driver. Trangrade kind of followed them home. If he maybe had a little more pace, we could have seen him involved, but just couldn't catch up to the pair of them and still took a third. Sebastian Tixier, will he be leading the points after this? That's the big question, as Gwen Old finished fifth behind him. And then Jorge Nieva managed to get sixth. David Rossi was seventh. Our points leader, Bill Tyler, only in eighth place. Calm, but maybe just collecting points when he didn't quite have the pace today. We'll see where this puts him in the end. Gary Quellen was ninth, and Ben Zoko wound up with 10th.
There in the 11th place position, we got John Olson, followed up with Yuri Giesen. Richard Watson, who was in a lot of the battles today, comes home 13th. Jeff Saunders there in 14th. Robert Plumley, also involved in that mid-pack scrum for the majority of the race, comes home with the top 15. Gary Ho there in 16th. Jack David Spickett, after starting on pit lane, comes home 17th. Yanni Lehman 18th, Paul Wilson in the 19th place, and Jason Clapper 20th.
21st went to Tobias R&V with Rafael Franco 22nd and Brad Cathcart in 23rd. Bjorn Ackerman, P24 for him today, followed by Stay Morris and Mats Linden. Last two to finish on the lead lap were Isan Gin, Terry Tromashauser. Kurt Clapper was the first one a lap down in 29th, followed by Alan Graham in 30th. And then from there, Jan Steven, also a lap down. Donald Peak had a bit of a problem, had to get some repairs, get back out 2 laps down. A couple other cars that kind of trundled around a similar fashion after wrecks. And then, unfortunately, we had about 3 or 4 DNFs at the very back of the field. That takes us to our winner with Jim Shedlick. And Jim, congratulations, your 8th win in this series, and we haven't seen you for a bit. You were back last week and unfortunately didn't quite go your way. Does this mean we're going to see you sticking around for the final races?
Thanks, I appreciate it. It's good to be back on the top of the podium again. It has been a little while. Still more or less part-time, but last week, as you said, didn't go quite my way, so I figured I couldn't end on that note, at least for this season. So I wanted to give it at least one more go.
And Toga, again, made you really work for it, much like we saw him fight for the win last week. What was going on there that he started to catch up partway through the race? Were you trying to manage things, or was his car genuinely faster in the middle part?
We just seem to pick up speed a little bit. I think the car just got a little bit more grip. I'm not sure if it's the cold temps or just the fuel burning off, but I noticed kind of a couple of the drivers behind me were able to use that grip a little bit faster than I was, and it got me out of rhythm a bit. But once I got back on it, I think I was fine. It's just he was in my slipstream at that point, so I knew from then on it would be a great battle.
And it was a great battle, side by side at one point for almost like half a lap. I mean, talk to us about that and having a race against it. Do you usually enjoy going head to head with Togo?
Oh yeah, Togo's a great person to go head to head with. He's extremely respectful, and I knew we could race fair and not have to worry about it, which was great. And he managed to get by me. He kind of threw a little bit of a fake move on me, and it got me, and he got by me. And I saw him slip up a little bit through maggots the next lap, and I knew I just had to pounce and kind of do the same thing to him, just get him offline a little bit before the hanger straight, and that gave me a chance to get back alongside. And like you said, we ran a couple corners side by side after that.
Great stuff from the pair of you. Hopefully we'll get to see that fight continue through the remaining races. Anybody you want to thank for getting you back on top?
Just shout out to friends and family, anybody who's watching right now. Been a busy time, haven't been able to race that much, but really glad I had a chance this weekend to run one more.
That's Jim Shedlick, your winner here today at Silverstone. Up next, we have top 10 finisher Ben Zoko with Joey.
Ben, congratulations on the 10th place finish. I know that it wasn't quite what you wanted to, but you had some heck of a battle out there, especially in the last handful of laps.
Yeah, that was awesome fun at the end there.
Well, go ahead.
Obviously I was behind. I made a good start, and I was behind John in maggot speckets, and he spun out there, and the safest thing to do was to just take to the grass to not continue my streak of getting crashed out a lot in these broadcast races recently. It's just a spate of bad luck sort of continuing there. But as you can see on the screen there, I made some good moves fighting my way back through the pack. And yeah, towards the end there was that pack of cars that were just a little bit slower than me. And they put up a good fight. So it was a good, fun battle in the end. So not really disappointed with the result in the end because it was a really fun race.
Well, Ben and I just went back and looked at the first lap here. I got to give you props because you did the right thing. The car lost it in front of you. You went off track driver's left, and not only did you avoid the accident, but then you rejoined very, very carefully all the way in the back of the pack. And I had no idea that you were so far back and worked your way all the way up to that 10th place position. That's one heck of a drive, man.
Yeah, I had some decent pace, I think. So it would have been interesting to see how the race would have panned out if I'd stayed where I was on the grid. I think it would have been still very intense, and I would have been, competitive with those people around me. John, Gwen, Jorge, but it wouldn't have been as easy to pass them. Although I had picked up one little trick since the race I did earlier today to go a bit faster and maybe make some moves, but. Yeah, it would have been an intense battle in a different way, but I did have fun coming back through the pack. There was, when I was back to 20th or past 20th, there were some people who would just let me go, which is fine. But that made it easier to get by a few. But there, when I caught up to that pack at the end of the top 10 there, it was game on, and it was a lot of fun. It was it was so much fun racing these guys again. Lots of respectful moves.
Well, we saw that mid-pack battle was really at it all race, and like you said, you worked your way through that pack. And looking forward to next week at Road America, quite a different circuit than the historic layout here at Silverstone. How's your confidence over there?
Yeah, that's one of my best tracks, funnily enough, and in this car too. I've taken a broadcast win there, I believe, back in the day, so I'm looking forward to going back there because I know I should be at least in that top 5, hopefully. If I can get a bit of practice in and nail the qualifying lap, I should be top 5 next week at Road America. It's going to be fun.
Well, you got to hold up your end of the bargain now, because I just wrote it down on the post-it note. Ben Zocco guarantees top 5 at Road America.
Yeah, as long as I could stay out of trouble. Again, like I said, I've had a string of bad luck that I don't normally get in the broadcast races. Normally, like I was expecting this season to be up there in like the top 3 of points, just due to consistent top 5s and picking up podiums when people crash out and stuff like that. But just like the big long string of good luck that I had, swings and roundabouts, it's back to a string of bad luck, and I'm sure it'll go back to a nice big long string of good luck, and I'll get some good results soon.
Well, congratulations on the top 10 finish. I know it wasn't what you wanted, but we're looking forward to Road America next week for you, Ben.
Going to be fun. I'll see you guys there.
That was your 10th place finisher, Joe Benjamin Zocco.
Sadly, doesn't look like our other top drivers are out there to talk to us today, so we're going to close up with a big thank you to the Grand Prix Legends community for bringing us on for another season of coverage, and also a thank you to the team today, Rob, Joey, and Dougie. Make sure to check out our social media, our website, and our merchandise store, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a moment. The next race, Road America, will be Saturday, February 18th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. But be sure to check out our other broadcasts, including up next, the Camel Series is up at noon Eastern today. Until next time, though, race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.